everyone. My name is Sharon Blackmore, and myself and Olive Gamel, we are super excited to bring you guys Facebook Live tips every day so you guys can learn at home while you're taking good care of yourself. So what I would like to share with you today is a little tip on how to square a large quilt backing. So we got to determine what the straight of grain is. How do we determine how to get that backing nice and straight? So there's a cross and lengthwise grain to the fabric. The lengthwise grain runs parallel to the selvage edge, and the crosswise grain runs away from the selvage edge, so perpendicular to the selvage edge. And so we want to determine where that straight edge is, because when we load our backing, that's the foundation. That's the first thing that we're going to do to get our quilt looking awesome. And why this is going to be important is we don't want to have any kind of diagonal weird stretching going on in the backing, or any pulling happening, any big kind of waves going on in the back, because that could result in some puckers on the back of the quilt. So this is a really important step. Now I'm going to show you on a smaller piece of fabric first, and then we'll show you on a larger piece of fabric. So this is about a meter or a yard, depending on who's watching. And I've got it folded so that the selvage edges are together. And the piece of fabric is pretty well pressed. That means that this pressed crease in the bottom has been pressed smooth. There's no crease there anymore. And I'm just going to take it between my thumb and my middle and pointer finger, and I'm going to shift it back and forth just ever so slightly. So if you can see what's happening to the bottom fold of that fabric as I shift this back and forth, it's becoming kind of wobbly and lumpy at the bottom. What we want to see is a nice, even kind of curve around the bottom edge, like so. And that's how we know where our straight of grain is, because then our threads are running horizontally and vertically. Once that's determined, we'll take that, and you can see this little bit of fabric that's right here. That's what we've got to trim off. And so when you're cutting fabric for a quilt, this is the same idea as preparing your backing for quilting. So with that set, let's get to the big piece now. So whenever possible, you want to try and load the backing so that you have a really nice straight edge on the backing leader. Now if you have a selvage edge on your fabric, that's perfect, because we already know that is a nice straight piece of fabric. But there's a couple scenarios that you may want to load it the other way. One, maybe you want to load it the other way so that the pattern that you've chosen travels along the length of the quilt. So maybe it's a directional choice that you have to make. The other reason might be is that somebody or you trimmed off the selvage edge, and so you're really not sure where that straight edge is. So here's gonna be our tip to help you determine that. I have my big piece of backing. This is a piece of 108 wide, and I've just taken and folded my fabric together so that my selvage edges meet up. And if they're trimmed off, don't worry about that. Just fold up the edges so that they meet on this end. And you're going to lay this over top of your belly bar. Now, in order to do this properly, without getting frustrated, you've got to have your backing leader up and wrapped around this belly bar. Otherwise, you'll have a slippery surface and your fabric's just going to slip right down to the floor. So you can use your side clamps to just hold them in place on both ends. And the canvas leader itself is going to act as one of our hands. Okay? So we have our fabric laid out. What I want you to pay attention to is that bottom edge, just like we looked at with the smaller piece of fabric, and see these kind of diagonal waves going on there. So how do we know which direction we need to move the fabric in order to straighten it out? We'll just do a little experiment on this side. And if we just take the top piece of fabric, we're going to leave the bottom alone. We just take the top piece of fabric and watch what's happening down here as I pull this just a little bit this way. You can see how that kind of evens out the fullness down at the bottom. But what if I pull too much? Now you can start to see those diagonal lines going in the opposite direction. So it's okay. You haven't made anything worse. All you've got to do is come back to this side and shift it back until you see that it's straight across the side. And you may have to go back and forth and do it once or twice. There's a little bit of a wave there. And get it as close as you can to nice and even. Okay, so the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to pick up this fold. And you could take this right to a large table and cut this as it is, but it's a really, really big piece of fabric. So it might be a little bit more challenging for you to deal with. So we can fold this by just holding on to that bottom fold and bringing it up. And going to do the same thing over here. So this is really important if you're going to do a fold, is you have to double check that you don't have any of this going on. We need to fix that. And we have to make sure it's nice and smooth before we cut anything. So we're going to do the exact same thing. Make sure that's nice and smooth. And you can feel it with your hands, run your hands across it, and make sure that it's nice and smooth. Because if you trim this with any wrinkles inside, those are now going to be jagged edges on your new straight edge. We want it to be nice and straight. Okay, so now I'll show you how to cut it. One of the things I like about my gamble table is it's got this table. And so I can just reach in here and grab all of the layers. I have my pickup bar all the way up, so it gives me some more room. And pull it together over onto my table without shifting those layers. And what you want to make sure is that it's nice and smooth. This side of the fabric you can have laying there. Nice and smooth all the way up. Nice and smooth all the way up with no wrinkles inside. That's going to be really important to make sure that you don't have any wrinkles inside there. Okay, so if you remember, our new straight edge, or our nice even fold, was at the bottom next to the floor. Now it's here. Now it's here closest to me. So what I can do is take a ruler, and you're going to shift it down so that one of the lines on your ruler here is right on top of that fold. And then the next thing you're going to do is just double check, take a peek underneath and see where the shortest piece is. Oh, there it is. So we don't want to take off more than we have to, but we need to make sure we catch all the fabric. So it's about right there. So I've just put my finger here and butted my ruler up about 1/4 inch away from the edge, and then lined this back up again. So now we can cut. I'm going to bring this down one more, actually, just so I can make a nice straight cut. And I'm going to start, you can see where I just caught that. And then when I pull this, you want to pull all the layers toward yourself, okay? Make sure that's nice and smooth up in here, because if it's not smooth, you will have jagged edges. And then make sure when you put your ruler back down that you've got 4 to 6 inches or so on top of your previous cut to make sure that this cut is staying nice and straight still. And the same thing. Now I've only folded this the one time. You could fold it more than once, but I would really caution the more folds you do, the more chance you have of getting little wrinkles and waves inside. So here's a little test. When you get to the end, you should have the edge, that fold that's up here, should be pretty much in line with one of those. So if I shift my ruler, it's going to come straight up there at the same time that my edge here is lined up with my previously cut edge. Now I'll continue, close my rotary cutter, And look at the difference here. Look at how wide this was on one end and how skinny it was on the other end. And so that's how you're going to take that and square it. Now this is your new square edge. So you can take this square edge and go directly to your belly bar and load it onto your backing leader, and now you have a brand new fresh straight edge to load with. So one other question I'll just quickly touch on that we see a lot of people ask is, should we load our quilt backings with the lengthwise grain on the belly bar or the crosswise grain on the belly bar? And really, if you straightened up or squared up your backing, it doesn't matter which way you load it, as long as you're mindful of which direction you have loaded, because the lengthwise grain, which is parallel to the selvage, is going to have very little stretch, and the crosswise grain is going to have more stretch. So we have tension from our pickup roller and our backing roller, and then we also have side tension from the side clamps. So you've just got to make sure whichever way you load it, that number one, it's square, and number two, you're not putting too much tension on the side clamps or the rollers that are going to cause any distortion in your quilt back. So I'll just let you know that you're more than welcome to ask questions or add comments to the video. I will absolutely pop in afterwards and answer your questions and chat with you about it if you have any comments or questions. And don't forget that Gamel is doing one of these Facebook Live tip videos twice a day, every day, and they are at 10:30 a.m. and 3 p.m. Central Time. Yeah, I'm in Mountain Time, so I have to make sure I remember that. It's 10:30 a.m. and 3 p.m. Central Time. And so make sure, if you enjoyed the video, to share it with your friends. Tell them to all tune in on those times. And you can always watch the video after it's been done live, so you can always share the videos and these wonderful tips with all of your quilting friends. Thank you so much for watching, and stay safe and healthy.